so you do. The point I'm trying to make, Professor, is that you do agree that there should be a regulatory environment and framework for the sale, marketing, and use of these products. And it strikes me as being somewhat curious that having accepted that there should be this regulatory framework, which is over and above and beyond simple consumer protection, that you therefore say, but actually, there shouldn't be any restriction on use in, for example, enclosed public places. Because what the bill here, what the legislation does not seek to say, is that there should be a ban on e-cigarettes. Nobody's saying that. And nobody's saying that they do not fulfill a function in terms of smoking cessation and the rest of it. However, what the bill and what legislation seeks to do is to provide restrictions on use. Now, you have already accepted that there should be restrictions in terms of a regulatory environment, and I'm interested into why you draw the line where you do and not accept that e-cigarettes should be treated in public policy terms in the same way as tobacco cigarettes.
So you mean, why would I vote against banning vaping in public places?
Yeah, having accepted the basic argument in favour of regulation.
Yes. I actually don't have very strong feeling about it. I personally don't like sitting next to vapors, but there are two reasons I would probably, on balance, without feeling very strongly either way, on balance I think I would vote against such regulation. One reason is that e-cigarettes do not harm bystanders. So the rationale we have for banning smoking is that there's a risk of passive smoking. There is no risk of passive vaping. So now you have the main reason for dictating what people can and can't do taken away. It now becomes just a question of, I don't like it, so I don't want people to do it. And you know, you get to shaky grounds. It's a dictator in North Korea, if he doesn't like a certain type of haircut, he can ban it. But you know, if somebody doesn't like people vaping, it's not a good enough reason to ban it. So I'm concerned about, you know, how far we go with dictating what people can and can't do. I think the heavy hand of regulation, prohibition should come down only when there really is a reason for it. And my second reason is this issue about smokers understanding that they should switch to vaping. If you ban vaping and smoking, and virtually the message is they are the same. They are dangerous, you shouldn't do it. And as we already discussed, the worry about non-smokers becoming vapers, it's not happening. So we're just talking about smokers. And I really would like to see some effort to correct this misperception and give out a message, look, smoking is really, really bad. Vaping is much, much safer. Why don't you switch to vaping? And I think being allowed to do it where smoking is prohibited puts that type of message in. I don't want to see vaping everywhere. I don't want to see vaping in my office and so on. But I think the owners of the various premises, you know, a university can ban vaping on its site, or a pub can ban it. And I would leave it to the owners of the premises rather than coming heavily from above and saying you mustn't do this because I said so.
So you'd accept the North Korean approach in your office, but you wouldn't accept it in my restaurant. But that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. But surely if you accept that vaping, as you say, is a alternative to smoking, and you know, that's what you seem to be saying, and I don't have any issue with that. Surely, if you were objective as a public health professional, as somebody who's involved in promoting public health, is to reduce the prevalence of smoking in society, and I presume that's what it is, we will reduce and eventually minimize the use of tobacco products. It seems somewhat contradictory, therefore, that you would accept the use of a nicotine product for enjoyment and leisure not as a smoking cessation medicine, but as a product for pleasure and enjoyment in a public place, when we have, I think, succeeded enormously over the last few years in removing the use of tobacco products from most public places?
I think the key bit you mentioned is to minimize damage to health from smoking. And so, to me, the most important consideration is what would this type of legislation do to smoking prevalence? I do think that e-cigarettes have a potential to just eradicate smoking, virtually. There will always be a few people left who will somehow smoke, but we could virtually get rid of smoking if e-cigarettes are allowed to take over. And then the concern is, right, but they would still be using nicotine. Well, if that doesn't carry great health risks, you know, it's healthier not to use any drug which has got an addictive potential. But if it doesn't carry any health risks, we are in the very similar territory to drinking coffee, which is a similar mildly stimulant drug. A lot of people get hooked on it. They spend more money on it than they want. You've got, you know, coffee shops all around the place with high prices, but we don't have great problems with it because it doesn't really harm people's health that much. And then, of course, we have alcohol, which does harm people's health and is dangerous, and we don't have any type of regulation like we're discussing here for alcohol. So I would rather if people didn't use any of this, but we now have actually a choice when they can either, the proportion of smokers we have, you know, there's still about 19% of the population smoking, and they are not the same smokers they were 50 years ago. I think that's, again, something people often don't appreciate. 20, 30 years ago, yeah.
When I see e-cigarette shops springing up around the place, what I see is products that are marketed to young people, largely. And, you know, this committee undertook an investigation over the last year into legal highs and the damage that they do to young people and to a population of young people. And I have to say, the only parallels I can draw on the high street between a head shop is an e-cigarette shop, in terms of the imagery that's used, in terms of the advertising that's used, in terms of the messages that are being communicated. And is it not the case that what we're seeing here with the growth of e-cigarettes is not a benign smoking cessation tool, which I would absolutely support, but actually the growth of a new tobacco-based product and an industry around that? Nicotine-based product.
Yes, no, I would not have the same take on this. I think there are these external appearances which are alarming. They were alarming for me when I first saw e-cigarettes. You know, I thought, like everybody else, here's some new trick and gimmick to get people hooked on smoking. But when you look at the development and evidence and what's happening over the past 3 or 4 years, it's not happening. It's not just that it's, you said, you know, it may not be benign. I think it's actually hugely beneficial. We need to keep an eye on it. If we do catch non-smokers who are now using e-cigarettes in large numbers, then I would go and do something about it. But if you do it preemptively, you may actually stop smokers switching to something much safer. At the moment, all vaping does is potentially saving lives rather than endangering anybody. And I think we've got this ingrained perception that you puff on something, clouds of smoke goes out, and it has to be terribly dangerous, and we have to put a stop to it, which was my initial reaction too. But once you realize that it's actually not harming health and it's helping smokers away from something which does, I think you have to acknowledge that.
Okay, thank you.
John? Yeah, could I just probe a little on the view that if we were to pass this legislation, putting e-cigarettes on the same footing as tobacco products, that it would send an unfortunate message to smokers or indeed users of e-cigarettes that e-cigarette use was equally as harmful as tobacco products, because it seems to me there are powerful drivers that are leading people to make the switch from e-cigarettes to from tobacco products to e-cigarettes in terms of health benefit and cost, and those benefits are widely understood. And I'm sure people who smoke or who have smoked and switched to e-cigarettes are aware of those health issues, because they've got a very strong vested interest to be aware of those health issues, given the importance of their own health. And people are reasonably intelligent. I think we're entitled to expect. So is there really much strength in that view that if we were to pass this legislation and put e-cigarettes on the same footing as tobacco products, that people would take from that e-cigarettes were equally as harmful and not make the switch, or indeed, if they have made the switch back to tobacco products? It seems strongly counterintuitive to me.
I think the damage possibly wouldn't be terribly strong. There may not be people who just say, oh, well, in that case, I go back to smoking, but I think it will contribute to it. I already mentioned this terrible thing we're seeing, that more and more people believe that it's not worth switching. And at the moment, e-cigarettes are not yet that good. They are a poor competitor to cigarettes. People have to put effort into switching. It's not easy. And you only put effort into things if you think it's worth it. And if there's a doubt in your mind, maybe it's not any better, then they won't. And then, of course, you've got a situation where vapers would be forced to go out into the rain to stand next to smokers, which will, of course, tempt them back to smoking. And I think the behavior I want to see is the vaping. I want smokers to stop smoking and start vaping. And so I will be concerned that the regulation will push them in the opposite direction. But as I said at the very beginning, my feeling about this are not tremendously strong. But I think you could make yourself look a bit intrusive and domineering and manipulative, dictating the population what they can and can't do in a very dubious area where really you don't have very strong reasons to do so. I would still need to see a really good argument for why is it good to do this.
Okay, just one further thing, Chair, if I may. I think you would accept, Professor, would you, that there is a degree of harm from the use of e-cigarettes to the user, even though that is obviously much less than use of tobacco products. If that is the case, it would seem to me a logical step to take from that what e-cigarette users exhale is harmful to some extent to people who are nearby in enclosed public spaces. Would you accept that, and would you and do you understand, if you do accept that, the view that there should be a precautionary approach, and that it's the duty of government to take that sort of precautionary approach to safeguard public health?
I don't think that is the case for passive vaping. I don't think there's any risk of passive vaping at all. The risks of passive smoking are in quite a substantial part related to what's called the side stream smoke. So you've got the cigarette burning in the ashtray, and then you've got the smoke which the smoker inhales and then exhales. What they exhale is now minus all the chemicals which are caught in the smoker's body. So that's a sort of less harmful part of passive smoking. The main part of passive smoking risks are from the side stream smoke.